But welcome to the Conversations with Kristen series. We are doing a series on thinking traps for the month of February. So we are on the final week of February, which means we're on part 4 of the Thinking Trap series. And similar to last time, I'm going to recall the traps that we've already done, which is unrealistic expectations, discounting the positive, and overgeneralization. Yes, I got it right. I remembered this time. I hope you remember too. But this week we are diving right into the last, y'all. There's a lot of thinking traps. Okay, there's a lot of them. But I had to narrow it down to what I feel is most common now. You know what I'm saying? So, like every year when I have these conversations around mental roadblocks and mental health in general and just our thought life and everything, I'm always trying to think of, what am I hearing in the conversations I'm having with my community, with my clients, online, in online spaces and that sort of thing. So these are really catered to the time period in which, I don't know, it's just something that I try to hone in on. What are the 4 that I want to talk about, or, the essence of what I want to get across to my audience at this present moment. For the last thinking trap, emotional reasoning was the one I came up with, like I said, or the one I decided on. And like I said, there are many, at least 15 different types of thinking traps, cognitive distortions, self-defeating thought patterns, whatever you want to use to frame it up. Thinking traps is what we're using for this context. And emotional reasoning is something that I was just like, you know what? I just feel, pun intended, I feel like that's something that we need to talk about. So that is what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you a good overview of emotional reasoning. There are so many things that are so many roadblocks and so many patterns that I think a lot of us would like to unlearn and undo that are driven by emotion. And I know I'm a woman too. You're a woman, I'm a woman. You're a woman probably. If not, that's cool too. But in our feminine side, we are all very emotionally passionate, and we can be driven by emotion for better or for worse. And so emotional reasoning is something that I really think is going to speak to a lot of you all. And the essence of emotional reasoning is assuming that our emotions are facts, that what we are feeling is the reality of the situation. Okay? And a lot of times on the therapy side with my therapy clients, I'm like, it sounds like your feelings are in the driver's seat. Like, let's just picture a car. Okay, let's do an SUV. So we have a couple of seats to choose from. You have all this other evidence. You have the progress that you've made, evidence of that. You have other people's, affirmations or mentioning of something to the contrary. You have all kinds of different seats that are filled, and your feelings are in the driver's seat, driving you all over the road. Taking you down this turn, taking you down that turn, taking you down a spiral. You know what I'm saying? And so that is a visual for emotional reasoning. It is when we let our emotions take the driver's seat, and whatever they say goes. Okay? We're not basing it off of anything else. Past history, our own knowledge, even when we can split, which I'll talk about, splitting yourself away from your emotion, and we can see that it's an emotionally driven decision or an emotionally driven conclusion that we're coming to, but yet and still the emotions are still in the driver's seat of our lives, making decisions, drawing conclusions, and determining the outcome of something that we otherwise would actually want to experience. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples of what this sounds like, and then of course we'll go from here to talk through some other aspects of it. So feeling unhealthy or fat, feeling unhealthy, feeling not good enough. Y'all, you could get any descriptor that you want, any self-deprecating type of label. And I'm not saying that all of these are, but with the intent that they are said to ourselves, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean, as far as what we tell ourselves in a way that's meant to be negative or felt negatively It could be unhealthy. It could be I'm overweight. I feel bloated. I feel this. I feel that. You know what I mean? But when we look at the evidence of other things, some people with body dysmorphia kind of go through this. But when we look at the evidence of things, it's not necessarily that that's true, right? Maybe you go to the doctor and your weight is within a quote unquote normal range, or maybe you feel unhealthy, but your numbers are within a normal range. Where is that feeling coming from, right? Why do you feel that way? Why is that driving the way you view yourself, how you measure your self-esteem? You know what I mean? We can really let those narratives control how we view ourselves, and when we look at it logically, or step back from it and look at it objectively, it's not necessarily true. Another one, I feel guilty. Let's give an example. I feel guilty for skipping that workout. I must have made the wrong decision in taking a rest day. Okay, you can feel two things can be true. Two things can be true. You might feel guilty, y'all, and fill in the blank with this one. You can feel guilty over anything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the decision you made was wrong. It may just be uncomfortable. It may just be something that you have to sit with because maybe you don't listen to that part of you, or, you know, whatever the case may be. But just because you feel guilty over skipping something, or setting a boundary, or saying no to something, or whatever the case is, doesn't necessarily mean that that's true, right? And we look into the evidence. What's lacking in that is looking into the evidence that would otherwise say that maybe it's time for a rest day. Maybe you've been going strong for 8 days now and it's time for a rest day. Maybe you've been going strong for 4 days now and your back is hurting and it's time for a rest day. Just because you feel guilty doesn't necessarily mean that what you did was wrong, or that there should be a negative implication on the decision that you made. Okay? You feel like a failure. So you assume that you have failed in the situation, or that the situation is hopeless. Okay? We can feel a certain way, and other things can be true at the same time, right? I might feel like a failure, but if I can step back, which I'm going to tell you guys how to do this, if I can step back and look at my situation objectively, I would probably see evidence that would argue with that, right? We all would. We would all see progress and success on some level, depending on what the situation is. Okay? So what is the negative impact of emotional reasoning? Emotions are good. I want to put that out there. Emotions are good. Emotions communicate with us. They might alert us to something. They might help us deepen our understanding of something, but they are not always based in the reality of what's actually going on. We have to discern and level ourselves to be able to know when our emotion is having an influence on something we should do, versus when our emotion is simply a feeling that's fleeting and that isn't necessarily rooted in wrongdoing or truth. Okay? What is the negative impact of this type of thinking trap? It can cause you to give up on something challenging that might positively benefit you. Okay? So if something feels hard and you say, this feels hard, it feels like I can't do it, and then you give up. Okay, well, that's not necessarily, just because it feels hard or it feels challenging to do something doesn't necessarily mean that it's not for you. And that's where it can get in the way. You think you are less than or unworthy because of one mistake. Okay, I feel guilty or ashamed about a decision that I made. And then now that wraps back into your self-worth and your view of yourself, and thus it can all of these can really end up being like self-fulfilling prophecies in a way, where because we have aligned with the emotion so much, we actually move through the situation as if it's true. And that's the problem, right? You might believe certain things that keep you stuck, you know? I think about this with our upbringing, you know, so some of us were, you know, berated growing up, or told, you know, negative messages about who we were or who we could be when we grew up. And sometimes we can take that and we can use that as motivation to move forward, but sometimes that can become a script that we've never really let go of, and we start to internalize it and say it ourselves. You know, I'm never going to make it. I'm never going to be successful. I'm never going to get there because of something that someone else planted in our minds. Let's see. What are some other ways that this shows up? You might end up asking for or expecting less than you deserve, right? I don't feel worthy, and so therefore I don't ask for the things that I deserve. I don't feel deserving, and so therefore I avoid letting people help me or letting people celebrate me or letting people do anything. You know what I mean? I could see a lot of isolation in this type of mindset as well. You might do something detrimental to your well-being because it feels good. Woo, now that's the one. That is also one. Okay, so it's not always about feeling bad, and so therefore associating something with having done something wrong or made a mistake. It could also be feeling good about something that ain't good for you, right? That is so true. I think about this when I think about my relationship with alcohol. I think about my relationship with food sometimes, my relationship with sugar. I think we can all actually use this on anything that we have used as a vice before, okay? Vices, certain things can be distractions or coping mechanisms to a certain extent, but there is a line that crosses over into something feeling good but not being good and really being self-destructive, right? And so yes, that may be your favorite food or your favorite dish or whatever. Like, for example, let's think about those of us who are lactose intolerant, right? Yes, the macaroni and cheese is good. Yes, the pasta, the creamy pasta is good. Yes, shoot, that bowl of cereal is good. But just because it's good and I feel happy from doing it and I feel joy from eating it and I get excited from eating it doesn't mean that that is actually good for me, as evidenced by my stomach hurting, my skin breaking out, my digestive issues. You get the point here. You get the point. So again, y'all, there's not a hard, fast rule to our emotions, nor is there a hard, fast rule to emotional reasoning. Sometimes things are intuitive. Sometimes things are at a place where we can use our emotions as a guide. But I want to talk to you about how to kind of make sure that you're just keeping things balanced, okay? It's a blend of being emotionally aware and then also objectively driven at the same time, right? So we're not throwing out the emotions, we're not throwing out the objective, we're trying to find a way to help them coexist to the point that they are beneficial to us and not in a skewed way that causes us to either move totally in logic all the time and have zero emotion, zero attachment to the things that we're actually, committed to or invested in. And then also not letting our emotions be in the driver's seat all the time and just up and down the roller coaster. I mean, I literally could feel 20 ways in one day. And if I let each one of those 20 ways direct my path throughout the day, I would get nothing done. Nothing. Like, zero things done. So we have to find a way to rationalize the emotions that we have sometimes to make a decision that logically makes sense, that objectively and structurally and chronologically is going to make sense. All right. So how do we do this? First thing we do, and if you're a note taker, this is where you would take the notes to have your points of to remember what you would do. The first thing you got to do is be aware, okay? A lot of us are driven by our emotions and we don't even know that the emotions are in the driver's seat, okay? That's literally a practice that I wish we learned at some point in school or, just in some sort of educational setting, to be honest with you, is how to be aware of what emotion you are experiencing and to know when you are at a intense state or a volatile state or just really emotionally driven, right? So we want to be aware of this, okay? You want to name the emotion and not the assumed outcome or the assumed impact it's going to have on you. For example, I'm overwhelmed by this situation is different than I can't do this. You see how I can't do this is kind of is making this assumption about what's going on. There's no emotion named, not even really aware of it. All I know is I just can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. When you name the emotion and say, I'm overwhelmed by the situation, you're already starting to separate yourself and give yourself an opportunity for some different coping avenues to navigate it. One, knowing that I'm overwhelmed, and so if I've been working and should be working on my coping skills just to have solid mental health and to, be a mature person and an emotionally, balanced and aware person, I'm going to have some coping skills for when I feel overwhelmed, right? So if I can name it, now I'm getting into some solutions already. But if I just say I can't do this, that's already an emotionally driven conclusion, which leads to quitting something that might otherwise be good for me, not asking for what I need, etc., etc. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is be aware. Name your emotion. And then the second thing that was a part of the first in a way is to separate yourself from your feeling. It's called decentering. I want to decenter the emotion from the situation. At this point, my emotion is in the driver's seat, making all the decisions in the fast lane, in the slow lane, taking the exits up and down the ramps, making a right, making a left, completely centralized in the situation. I need to decenter and separate myself from the emotion. I'm overwhelmed by the situation. How can I, the calm one, the one that's actually observing this whole thing, I'm observing my emotion, I'm observing the situation, and I'm observing my options for how I'm going to cope, right? So now I can separate myself and make a decision, okay? Let's think about this when it comes to goals that you might want to set, okay? You might feel discouraged, okay? But instead of saying, I can't do this, I can't be consistent, I can't follow through with this is too hard for me, this is whatever, I'm saying I'm overwhelmed by the commitment that I've made. And then now we can get into some options for what can I do to make myself feel less overwhelmed without being completely driven by the emotion, right? So another way of decentering is to remember the facts of the situation. If you feel like a failure because you missed a workout or you missed a week of workouts or you fell off for a month or whatever the case may be, you can feel your feelings about it, but you also got to separate the facts of the situation and maybe even taking in the bigger picture, which we talked about before too. Taking in the bigger picture of what's happening. We actually did talk about this with discounting the positive, right? And so that is a way that you can start to do this. You could also do a pros cons list if it's something that you're having a debate on and you're thinking about, you're thinking about, ooh, this is a good one. For that one that was about doing something that's detrimental to your well-being, you could be feeling not so good in your body, right? You could be feeling not so good in your body, and then you could also feel like you want to start a diet. You might even be excited about the diet, right? The best thing you can do in that situation is to not be emotionally and impulsively driven by the excitement and the allure of this new diet, which there's nothing new under the sun, let's be honest, but it's to go and look at the pros and cons. Let's just pull back from the emotion. I'm excited about this diet. I really, really want to lose weight. Maybe I'm feeling like a failure with what I've been doing and I'm eager to try something new. Emotion. Let's separate and let's do a pros cons list of this diet. Is this good for me? Is this good for me to do this? What evidence do I have that this is going to be good for me? What evidence do I have that this is maybe not going to be good for me by looking at the history of my situation? All right. The third thing is to cope. Tend to the emotion. All right. You've named it. You separated yourself from it. Now let's go tend to it. Let's go cope with it. Let's go work through it. Let's get a sounding board. Let's talk it out. Whatever your coping skills might be, it's just a way of toning down the emotion, cooling off the emotion is what I call it, because emotions come in hot, piping hot, attention seeking, very strong, very intense. It's not that the emotion isn't necessary. We just need to pull it down a little bit and make sure that it is level with some other considerations that we need to have. And then the last thing after doing that is to handle and make the decision, right? So we're not completely throwing emotion into the trunk. Y'all remember that car analogy that I had? The emotion's not in the trunk necessarily. Emotion's like in the back seat in like a car seat, okay? With the child lock on the door, okay? So the emotion, we did kick the emotion out. We didn't say you're not relevant to some degree, but we gotta put things in perspective and say the emotion can stay, but you're a bit childish, you're not thinking clearly, so let's put you in the car seat, let's buckle you in. You can still come, you can still, whine, cry, whatever from the back seat, but you're not gonna be driving the car. I'm driving the car. Me with the evidence of what I have done well, with perspective on the positives that are going for me, whatever the case may be, I am in the driver's seat of the decisions that I'm about to make. All right, how do I want to move forward in this situation now that I have tamed that emotion on some level? All right, you guys, that is the gist of the emotional reasoning. I really think this is so important because how many of us set goals, start new habits, are trying to break free from something, a stronghold that's been on our lives, and then our emotional reasoning comes in and completely wipes out the entire week. I've already messed up. I might as well, and I've already failed. I already feel like a failure, so I might as well just forget it. How many times do we do that to ourselves, right? All of these thinking traps are starting to add up and kind of come into also this one, in that we can sometimes get in our own way thinking this way, right? We come in with our own assumptions, our own conclusions, not really based in anything of reality. And if it is based in reality, it's not to the point that it's beneficial to us, right? So we only want to take in what is good for us in either correcting something or moving us forward. If it's meant to just throw you off your game and berate you and beat you down and to have you quit, that's not helpful. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't even matter if it's true or not. It's not helpful. And I think that's something that is so hard for people to capture, is that if it's not helpful, we don't need it, okay? Even negative stuff and hard to hear stuff can be helpful, but when it stops being helpful and it starts to paralyze you and keep you from moving forward, well then now it's not helpful anymore, right? We got to find something else. So thank you all for joining Emotional Reasoning. I'm going to recap it really quickly at the end. Emotional reasoning is assuming that our emotions are our reality. Instead of finding things that are rooted in facts and in logic, we are heart-driven too much to where the emotion that we're feeling in that moment can have us make a decision that changes the entire trajectory of what we were working on in general, right? You can feel this in your wellness journey, in your mental health journey, in your relationships. It's really across the board. And the negative impact is that it can be getting in the way of things that would otherwise be good for you, or it can have you taking on things that feel good but aren't necessarily good for you. All right. And the 4 steps that I want you all to remember as far as how to handle this is awareness of the emotion, decentering the emotion, cope with the emotion, and then handle the situation. Ah, that's good. That's real good. That is good. All right. Thank you all for joining in live. Thank you all for watching the replay. If you have enjoyed the Thinking Trap series, please remember and take these notes with you into your future endeavors, into your everyday life. You don't want to miss out on the freedom and the progress that is on the other side of getting past these traps. Literally getting past these traps can be the difference between staying stuck and moving on for good. Okay? Thank you all for joining. Bye.